Eden Grant stood frozen, her hand still raised mid-solution when Professor Whitmore laughed and said, "Sweetheart, this class isn't for you." The lecture hall erupted in quiet gasps. But no one spoke up. She just solved a problem no one else dared attempt. And yet, her reward wasn't praise, it was erasure. What happened next shattered the illusion of fairness forever. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel, and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. Eden Grant stepped into the lecture hall, clutching her worn leather notebook with a quiet confidence that only came from years of self-discipline. The room buzzed with the low hum of privileged chatter, North Face jackets, and sleek MacBooks snapping open in unison. Every seat was filled with expectation. This was Columbia Tech, one of the hardest STEM schools in the country, and Calculus 3 wasn't for the faint of heart. She scanned the massive amphitheater. Most students were already seated. Conversations hushed as she moved to the front row, the only available seat left. She felt the subtle, heavy weight of eyes following her. Not because she was late, but because she was the only black student in a sea of pale, privileged faces. Her braids, wrapped into a neat bun, framed a face both youthful and worn. She carried herself like someone who'd had to prove herself 10 times before being believed once. The silence didn't scream racism, it whispered it. Someone coughed behind her, followed by a not-so-quiet, lost. Eden didn't flinch. She slid into her seat and opened her notebook to a page filled with neatly organized equations. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind. "Let your work speak, Eden. Never your anger." The room fell completely silent. As the side door opened, Professor Daniel Whitmore entered, carrying an aura thicker than his tweed blazer. Known across campus for his hard-nosed brilliance and ruthless exams, he was a relic of academic elitism. Students both admired and feared him. He dropped his leather satchel on the table and clicked the projector on. "Calculus 3, he announced flatly, scanning the room with surgical eyes. "This course will break you, unless you're ready to be broken. Let's weed out the daydreamers early." Murmurs of nervous laughter. Whitmore began scribbling a multivariable limit problem on the board. The symbols danced like a foreign language, intimidating even the confident ones. Eden leaned forward, her mind already dissecting it. He turned. "Anyone want to take a stab at this before we begin?" No one moved. Eden did. She raised her hand, calm and certain. For a moment, the room froze. Whitmore narrowed his eyes. "Yes, you," he said, waving a piece of chalk in her direction. New face. Eden rose, notebook in hand. Whispers rippled across the room. As she stepped up to the board, Whitmore tilted his head. "Name? Eden Grant." He paused. "Grant? As in, are you in the right section? This is Calculus 3, upper division." Eden nodded. "Yes, I am." A beat of silence. He smirked, but it didn't reach his eyes. She took the chalk, glanced at the problem, then began to solve it. Her hand moved fast but clean, balancing logic and fluidity. Line by line, she deconstructed the problem. Students craned their necks. The murmuring stopped. Whitmore watched, arms crossed. His smirk faded. Eden circled her final answer, stepped back. Whitmore approached the board, read her work, then double-checked. He turned slowly. "Interesting," he said. "Either you've seen this exact problem before, which is unlikely, as I created it this morning, or you're very good at pretending." Gasps. A few chuckles. The sting was immediate. Eden said nothing. Her face stayed composed, but her grip on the chalk tightened slightly. Whitmore nodded once. "Take your seat, Miss Grant. Let's see if you can keep that up." She returned to her desk, not looking left or right. Inside, something twisted. Not from shame, but from the realization. She hadn't just walked into a classroom. She'd walked onto a battlefield. As Whitmore turned to write the next problem, he made a pointed comment, barely veiled. "It's always fascinating to see who thinks they belong here. The semester will be a harsh filter." No one laughed this time. Eden looked down at her notes, but the words blurred. And then she noticed something. A student beside her slid his phone across the desk, showing a text on his screen. It read, "Who invited the DI princess to a calculus course?" She met his eyes. He didn't flinch, just smirked. That was the first cut. The kind that doesn't bleed but burns. The kind you carry. And just as she tried to refocus, Whitmore turned around again. "Miss Grant," he said, "before we go any further, are you absolutely sure you're in the right classroom?" Her silence was louder than words. There were two kinds of brilliance in the world. The loud kind that announced itself in boardrooms and debates, and the quiet kind that bloomed in solitude, unnoticed until it changed everything. Eden Grant belonged to the second kind. Before she was Eden the calculus student, she was Eden the janitor's daughter. She used to walk past the gates of Columbia Tech when she was 10, watching students shuffle out of buildings her mother cleaned after hours. The shine of academia felt like another planet, lit by privilege and powered by names no one questioned. Her mother, Claudine, never spoke bitterly, only honestly. "They'll never expect you to be the smartest one in the room," she'd say. "So go ahead, be it." Eden was born in a rent-controlled walk-up in Harlem, raised between second-hand textbooks, frozen meals, and hours spent at the library, while her mother worked night shifts. When other kids played video games, Eden solved equations from MIT OpenCourseWare. When they rolled their eyes in algebra class, she was in the back quietly proving theorems with a ballpoint pen. She didn't go to STEM summer camps or international math Olympiads. Those cost money. Instead, she stayed late in the school library, scavenging free PDFs and scribbling notes on the backs of diner receipts. Her favorite Christmas gift ever? A used copy of Calculus on Manifolds with Claudine's handwritten message inside. "To my beautiful genius, one day they'll have to see what I already do." Her teachers noticed. Some encouraged her. A few tried to steer her toward more realistic goals. But there was one, Mr. Holloway, her high school math coach, who told her flat out, "You have the gift, the kind that scares people. Use it." He was the first to put her in front of a whiteboard and say, "Prove it." And she did, again and again. By the time she was 17, Eden had solved problems from college textbooks her peers couldn't even read. Not because she wanted to impress anyone, because her mind demanded it. Getting into Columbia Tech had been more than a victory. It was a form of generational retribution. But it also came with a hidden cost. From day one, she felt it in the eyes of the staff. In the pauses before people said her name. In the subtle arch of a professor's brow when she raised her hand. She wasn't just a student. She was a symbol they hadn't asked for. That night, after Professor Whitmore's subtle humiliation, Eden sat in the dim dorm room, scrolling through problem sets on her laptop. Her roommate Emily, a bubbly mechanical engineering major from Connecticut, walked in, stopped mid-step. "You okay?" she asked, peeling off her coat. Eden didn't look up. "Fine. He was a jerk today. I mean, that whole 'are you in the right room' thing. Gross." Eden nodded once, but didn't answer. Emily hesitated. "For what it's worth, your solution was wild. Like, I don't think I understood the first two lines." That made Eden glance up. Not with a smile, just a quiet acknowledgement. "Thanks." The next morning, Eden was at the lecture hall before the sun had fully risen. The janitor looked surprised to see her, but gave a small nod as she took her place in the front row again. No headphones this time. Just silence, and a chalkboard already etched in her imagination. Whitmore walked in 20 minutes later, surprised to see someone there already. He gave her a quick glance, but said nothing. He began the lecture with a boundary problem wrapped in a triple integral. Eden recognized the trick instantly. It was designed to confuse by altering the coordinate system halfway through. "Let's test our foundations," Whitmore said, tossing the chalk in the air and catching it. "Anyone want to try?" No one moved. Eden stood. No hesitation. No reaction to the rustle of murmurs that swept through the back rows. She erased the board, rewrote the problem cleanly, then began. Her writing was fast but not rushed, efficient, economical, like she was having a conversation with the numbers, and they listened. Some students watched in silence, others stared with faint disbelief. The chalk squeaked once as she boxed her answer. Whitmore approached the board slowly. He traced her work line by line, then paused. "Miss Grant," he said carefully, "this is extremely advanced. Impressive, or suspicious." Eden looked at him. "Suspicious?" He folded his arms. "It almost mirrors a solution submitted to a 2018 graduate-level problem set. Verbatim, in fact." Gasps. A few phones slid out to Google. Eden's stomach dropped. "I've never seen that." Whitmore tilted his head. "Curious. We'll verify. For now, return to your seat." As she walked back, someone muttered loud enough, "Guess genius has a good memory." Eden sat, fists clenched under the desk. She didn't cry, but her mind raced. She knew she hadn't plagiarized. The thought of it felt insulting. Her entire life was about solving things the long way. The hard way. The honest way. That evening, she called her mother. Told her about the accusation. Claudine was quiet for a moment. "They can't believe someone like you could be that good," she said. "It hurts, Ma. I know, baby. But you were born to make them uncomfortable. That's part of the gift." Eden didn't want to be a symbol. She wanted to be seen for her mind. Not her skin. Not her story. Just the math. But this was Columbia Tech, and nothing about it was neutral. The accusation lingered in the air long after the classroom emptied. Eden sat motionless, her notes untouched. Her mind replayed every line she had written, every curve of chalk that had flowed from her hand onto the board. There was no doubt in her mind. The solution was hers. Entirely. Uniquely. But in Professor Whitmore's world, brilliance from someone like her was a red flag, not a revelation. Whitmore was a legend among faculty. Tenured before 40, published in 5 languages, quoted in textbooks across the country. His name carried weight, his lectures packed lecture halls, and his reputation built walls. But for many black and brown students, he was something else, a gatekeeper. He never said anything overt. That was the genius of it. No slurs, no explicit bias, just the slow erosion of confidence, one comment at a time. A question framed as concern. A lowered grade, no one could argue. A recommendation letter that never materialized. Years earlier, a sophomore named Melik Turner had dropped out mid-semester after Whitmore accused him of inflating his credentials. Another student, Amara Little, was told in front of a class that her approach to logic was emotional rather than mathematical. And when a teaching assistant had casually asked Whitmore why there were so few students of color in his honors section, the response was measured. "I don't select the students, the material does." It was the kind of prejudice that couldn't be proven on paper. But you could feel it, in your gut, in the way his eyes lingered, just a second too long, in the smiles he gave other students, but withheld from you, in the feedback that was never constructive, just cold. Eden had tried to convince herself it was just academic rigor, that maybe he was just hard on everyone. But the pattern was too consistent, and now, it was personal. She left class in a fog. The halls felt longer than usual, the fluorescent lights harsher. Whispers followed her. Did she cheat? No way she solved that on the spot. He wouldn't accuse her for no reason. Back at her dorm, she didn't speak to anyone for hours. She didn't cry. She calculated, reviewed the problem again, reworked it on paper to be sure. It was her solution, through and through. Later that night, Emily knocked. "Hey, want to go to the dining hall? Just for a break?" Eden shook her head. Emily hesitated. "Do you want me to say something? About what happened? Because that wasn't right." Eden looked up. "And say what? That a white professor doesn't think a black girl can be good at math." Who would listen? The silence between them said everything. Meanwhile, Whitmore sat in his office, the lights low, grading papers in red ink. He paused over Eden's name. The same solution she'd written on the board sat in front of him, transcribed neatly. He stared at it for a long moment, then slid it aside. He opened his faculty email and typed slowly. "Student Eden Grant. Potential academic integrity concern. Reviewing similarities with prior work. Will follow up." No proof. No formal investigation. Just enough to plant doubt. What Whitmore didn't know was that the walls around him weren't as solid as they seemed. That evening, a graduate assistant named Jonah Kramer, responsible for managing digital archives of assignments, noticed something odd. Whitmore had downloaded Eden's solution file 3 times. Each time he renamed the file before closing it again. Jonah frowned. He had no love or hate for Whitmore. But he was meticulous, and something about that behavior didn't sit right. The next day, Eden showed up to class again early. Whitmore didn't greet her, didn't acknowledge her at all. Instead, he passed out a pop quiz. 5 problems. Advanced. Time limit 20 minutes. As students scribbled, Eden worked in silence. She didn't just solve the problems. She optimized them, reduced unnecessary steps, introduced efficiencies no one else noticed. Whitmore collected the quizzes, glanced at Eden's last, and raised a brow, but didn't say a word. 2 days later, when the scores were posted online, Eden's grade was listed as incomplete. She stared at the screen, pulse rising. She'd finished every problem, checked them twice. She went to the TA, a distracted PhD candidate, who shrugged and said, "Sorry, Prof. Whitmore logs those manually. Maybe he hasn't updated it yet." But Eden knew better. She took a deep breath, pulled up her own copy of the quiz she'd photographed before turning it in, and emailed it with a timestamp to Whitmore, asking for clarification.
No reply.
That night, Jonah checked the grading logs again. There it was, Eden's grade marked as 91, then deleted, then replaced with I. The timestamp showed it had been changed at 11:47 p.m., long after office hours. Jonah hesitated. He didn't know Eden, but he knew the patterns. And this one was too deliberate. He slid his phone into his pocket and made a decision. The next morning, he placed a small pinhole camera behind a stack of books in the office he shared with Whitmore. It pointed directly at the professor's computer. Jonah didn't tell anyone. Not yet. A week passed. Eden tried to stay composed, but the tension was mounting. She overheard students speculating that she was being investigated for plagiarism. Someone even posted a meme in the anonymous school chat app, a stock photo of a black woman holding a calculator, captioned, "When you solve math by divine intervention." She didn't respond. She just buried herself in more work, more silence. Then, one afternoon, Jonah reviewed the camera footage. There it was. Whitmore, sitting alone in his office, opened Eden's grade record. He hesitated, then manually typed a lower quiz score, 72, and hit save. But that wasn't the worst part. He then opened a document titled Recommendation Candidates 2025, scrolled down to Eden's name, and added a note beside it. Integrity issues, flag for review. Jonah's mouth went dry. He backed up the footage to his external drive. Twice. What Whitmore didn't know yet was that he'd just crossed a line that could end a career. At first it was subtle. The empty seat beside Eden in Calculus 3 didn't fill anymore. Not even when the lecture hall was packed. Students began whispering before class, their voices dropping as she approached. No one laughed at her jokes during group work. Some didn't even respond. A silence took root, not from disinterest, but design. Word had spread, not from Whitmore directly. He was far too careful for that. But rumors have their own velocity, especially on campuses where gossip travels faster than fact. She's under academic review. Used someone else's work from a grad seminar. Only reason she's still here is because she checks every diversity box. Affirmative action, baby. Eden felt it before she heard it. The shift, the avoidance, the recalculated politeness. In her computer science elective, her lab partner asked the professor if he could switch groups. In the cafeteria, a cluster of students stood mid-meal to find another table when she sat down. Even her professors outside of Whitmore's orbit began treating her differently, less enthusiastic in their praise, quicker to interrupt her, slower to respond to emails. The suffocating part wasn't that people believed she cheated. It was that they believed she didn't belong, and now they had a reason to justify it. Emily noticed. "This is ridiculous," she snapped one night in their dorm room. "It's like you're being shadow canceled." Eden didn't respond. She was too used to being erased to be surprised. She buried herself in work. She started arriving to class even earlier, staying later. She sat in the library until the security guard did his rounds. But brilliance is lonely when no one wants to sit next to it.
Then came the podcast.
It was an anonymous student-run show called Ivory Underground, mostly satire and gossip. But this episode was different. It featured a distorted voice claiming to be a TA from the math department. The speaker claimed, "There's a student whose answers match graduate material too closely. Her name's being protected for now, but let's just say she checks a lot of boxes."
They didn't say Eden's name. They didn't have to.
Within 24 hours, the post was trending on campus forums. A thread on the Columbia Tech subreddit exploded with speculation. One post read, "If you can't prove she cheated, at least prove she's not some admin PR project." Eden kept her head down. But she noticed her inbox started to change. Emails from professors who once praised her now carried colder tones. A research opportunity she'd applied for weeks ago was suddenly postponed indefinitely. Even in spaces where she'd felt safe, the air was changing. In the Women in STEM mentoring group, a student stood up during a panel and said, "We should be careful who we idolize, especially when things look too good to be true." Every head in the room subtly turned toward Eden. But it all came to a head one Wednesday afternoon. Eden had stayed late after class to ask a question about a tensor identity. When she returned to the library and opened her laptop, a notification popped up. "Airdrop request from Campus Click." She frowned, accepted it. A single screenshot appeared. It was from a private group chat, titled Reality Check. 12 participants, mostly students from her major. A few she recognized by name. The messages were brutal. She probably doesn't even write her own code. DI hires coming for our futures. When you cheat but still get coddled 'cause you're black and female. Jackpot. I give it a semester before she drops? Or gets kicked. And then, the one that stopped Eden cold. She needs to be put in her place. A little public shame might do it. She stared at the screen, numb. A laughter from a nearby table broke her trance. She looked up and saw 3 of the names from the chat, huddled around a laptop. They glanced her way. One of them smirked. It wasn't just exclusion anymore. It was planned. She closed her laptop and walked fast. Her feet moved with no clear destination. She ended up in the basement of the student union, in a dark corner with vending machines and cracked vinyl couches. The kind of place where no one asked questions. For the first time in weeks, she let herself cry. The tears came silent but full, falling into the folds of her sleeves. She didn't sob. She didn't wail. But the pressure finally cracked. She wasn't mourning her reputation. She was mourning her right to exist without suspicion. 20 minutes passed before she wiped her face and pulled out her phone. She opened the screenshot again. Saved it. Then scrolled through the names. She recognized one. Levi Connors. A junior. Son of a major donor. Whitmore's favorite. The pieces began to connect. Back in her dorm, she compiled everything. The airdrop. The Reddit thread. Her changed grade. And Jonah's silent glances when they passed in the hall. Something bigger was at play. She just didn't know how deep it went. The next day, someone slipped a note under her door. No name. Just 2 lines written in careful print. Watch your back. He's setting you up. Check the grading system logs. Ask Jonah. Her breath caught. She texted Jonah. Can we talk? He replied instantly. Meet me at the archives room. After hours, the invitation came wrapped in formality, masked as honor. An embossed email from the Columbia Tech Mathematics Department. Department Mixer. Faculty, graduate students, and select undergraduate talent. Eden reread it, unsure whether it was a recognition or a setup. After weeks of whispers, cold stares, and a digital smear campaign that left her isolated, the idea of stepping into a social event hosted by the very people whose silence had deepened her wound felt like walking into enemy territory. Emily was thrilled. You've earned this. Let them see who you are in person, face to face. But Eden didn't want to be seen anymore. She wanted to disappear just long enough to remember who she was before all this. Still, she went. Because disappearing meant letting them define her, and that was something she would never allow. The Athenaeum room was elegance weaponized. Massive chandeliers cast gold light on velvet-lined walls. Servers floated between clusters of suited professors and cocktail-dressed graduate students. Laughter echoed like money. Eden stepped in wearing a black sheath dress and heels she'd borrowed from Emily. She stood straighter than she felt. She'd barely made it 10 feet inside when a tall woman in an event lanyard tapped her shoulder and pointed to a table. They're out of wine. Can you refresh? Eden blinked. I'm not. But the woman was already turning away. The humiliation sat hot on her face. Still, she smiled tightly and moved on, clutching her clutch with white knuckles. She made her way toward the refreshment table, trying to disappear into the crowd without looking like she was trying. A professor whose lectures she'd never been in stopped her with a confused squint. You're Eden Grant? Yes. You're the one with the incident. She stared. If you're referring to the math quiz. He waved a hand dismissively. Water under the bridge, I'm sure. Just keep your head down and work hard. Everything evens out. The next conversation was worse. At a table of alumni, she was asked if she was shadowing the event for hospitality experience. Another graduate student asked if she'd been fast-tracked from an equity pipeline. And then came the most piercing moment of the night. Bryce, her TA, approached her with a tray of wine glasses. Could you actually take these over to the main table? He asked, then did a double take.
Oh.
Eden. Wow, I didn't recognize you. She didn't respond. The silence between them was loud. Bryce stammered. Sorry, I mean it's dark in here. She walked away. On the balcony, Eden exhaled for the first time all night. The cold air bit into her lungs, but it was better than the manufactured warmth inside. She gripped the railing, staring out at the skyline. For a moment, she let her mask fall. The pride, the strength, the practiced poise. All of it cracked. She was tired. Not from math, Not from the challenge, but from the endless requirement to prove she wasn't a fraud in a room full of people who believed she must be. The door slid open behind her. Voices carried over the sound of jazz and clinking glass. It was Whitmore. He's really considering her. A second voice, Delaney, head of the honors committee, replied. It's a gamble. She's talented, sure, but with all the controversy, it's risky. We need someone who won't make donors nervous. Whitmore gave a low chuckle. She's a walking headline. If we endorse her and this blows up, it reflects on all of us. I told you we should have backed Connors. Safer. Predictable. He knows how to play the game. Eden didn't move. The voices drifted back inside. She stayed on the balcony, fingers frozen, heart numb. They weren't just questioning her future. They were engineering it. Quietly, surgically. Inside, she returned to the hall like a ghost. Her name had been included in the event program under notable talent, but her table card was missing. She stood, watching other students take their seats, some with pride, some with entitlement. A faculty assistant walked past. Oh, are you looking for something? Eden said, I think I'm supposed to be seated. The assistant checked the list. Oh, I don't see a grant. Did you RSVP late? No. Oh, maybe there was a mix-up. We can get you a spot in the back.
The back.
She sat alone, next to a folding chair meant for catering overflow. The dinner passed in a blur. Keynote speakers, announcements. None of them included her name. Toward the end, Whitmore took the mic. He praised students for grit, excellence, and discipline. Then he announced a new scholarship fund, backed by Levi Connor's family. Levi stood up, beaming. When Eden clapped, it was out of reflex, not celebration. After the event, as guests filtered out, Professor Holloway, the only teacher from her high school, who kept in touch, appeared. I saw your name in the program, he said warmly. Thought you might need a familiar face. Eden's lips trembled. They don't want me here. They don't have to. You belong anyway. That night, back in her dorm, Eden opened her email. One new message, from an anonymous account. Subject line, audio file, department mixer. She clicked play. It was a recording of Whitmore and Delaney, and they'd said much more than she'd heard. Whitmore, we should push her off the shortlist before this escalates. Delaney, let it happen naturally. Just make sure her evaluations reflect the concerns. Whitmore, already handled. Midterm week at Columbia Tech had a scent coffee, printer ink, and panic. Students flooded the library, pulling all-nighters fueled by energy drinks and whispered prayers. Even the air in the lecture halls grew heavier, dense with competition and fear. Eden didn't panic. She never had. She prepared. She structured her days into intense study blocks, isolated herself from distractions, and approached the chaos with surgical precision. While other students buried their anxiety under caffeine and guesswork, Eden broke down concepts to the bone, rebuilt them, and internalized them like muscle memory. Calculus 3 wasn't just a test of knowledge, it was a test of narrative. Eden knew what this midterm represented. If she aced it, the smear campaign would start to crack. If she faltered, they'd make it gospel. The classroom on test day was a pressure cooker. Whitmore sat at the front like a monarch presiding over a trial. Glasses low on his nose, expression unreadable. Students filed in silently, some offering Eden nervous glances, others pretending not to see her at all. She walked to her seat in the front row, dropped her bag, and exhaled slowly. Whitmore handed out the exams himself. As he placed her copy on her desk, his hand hovered a half-second longer than necessary. No calculators today, he said. Full logic. Show every step. Eden met his eyes. I planned to. The test was brutal. A grueling mixture of multivariable calculus, theoretical puzzles, and conceptual analysis disguised as computation. But Eden didn't just survive it. She thrived in it. Her pen moved with steady confidence, and she worked with the kind of quiet joy that only came when she was deep in flow. She felt herself rising above the noise, above the doubt, carried by a rhythm only she understood. When she finished, she flipped the final page, boxed her answer, and let out a controlled breath. She looked up. Most students were still sweating over page 3. She rose, walked to the front, and placed her exam directly into Whitmore's hand. He didn't thank her, just nodded. That night, she allowed herself something rare. Sleep. She didn't check her email, didn't rework any problems in her head, just curled into her blanket and drifted into dreamless rest. but dreams can't protect you from sabotage. The next morning, her phone buzzed with messages. Grades are up. Check the portal. Eden sat up, reached for her laptop, and opened the university's online gradebook. She scrolled past her other courses, B plus A, until she reached Calculus 3. Status pending review. She stared. Other students had scores, 82-75, 89, but hers was blank. Just that cold, clinical phrase. She refreshed the page. Still the same. She texted Emily. My grade isn't showing. Emily replied instantly. Mine's up. That's weird. Want me to ask Bryce? Bryce. The TA was known to be both disorganized and eager to please. Emily's message to him was short. He replied 10 minutes later. Professor Whitmore said there was a delay with one exam. Should be sorted soon. Delay. Eden's stomach dropped. She emailed Whitmore directly. Good morning, Professor. I noticed my midterm grade is marked as pending. I submitted the test directly to you at the end of the exam period. Please let me know if anything is needed. No reply. Days passed. Her anxiety hardened into suspicion. By Friday, her status hadn't changed. She returned to Whitmore's office during posted hours. The door was shut. A paper note taped outside read, "Office hours canceled by appointment only." She knocked anyway. No answer. That weekend, Eden dug through her files. She found her handwritten prep notes, every practice test. She even found the original draft of her midterm answers, the outline she'd scribbled before the test began, all dated, all authentic. Then she remembered. Before turning in the real exam, she had taken a photo of the first page. It was her habit, just in case. She pulled it up. There it was. Clear. Time-stamped. Dated. Her name in block letters. The first 3 problems solved. It wasn't the full test, but it was proof she'd been there. She forwarded the image to the TA and CC'd the department head. Still, no response. By Monday, a new email appeared in her inbox. Subject: Academic Integrity Notification. Dear Ms. Grant, a discrepancy has been reported concerning your Calculus 3 midterm. The test could not be located among submitted materials. As per protocol, the matter will be escalated to the Office of Academic Integrity. You are advised to refrain from contact with faculty regarding this matter until your hearing is scheduled. The words blurred. She had done everything right. Everything. And yet she was still here. Back in a corner. Back under suspicion. She forwarded the photo again. Added more explanation.
No reply.
That night, Emily knocked on her door. Hey, I heard from a friend in the student senate. Whitmore's claiming he never received your test. Eden's breath caught. He's lying. I believe you. But they don't care about truth. Just protocol. Later, another email arrived. From Jonah Kramer, the quiet grad assistant who had slipped her notes before. I need to show you something. Meet me after hours. Archive lab. Alone. Eden's pulse spiked. She walked across campus in the cold, every footstep echoing like judgment. Jonah let her in through a side door. Inside, he handed her a USB drive. I set up a camera weeks ago, after I saw your grade get deleted the first time. Eden blinked. You what? I wasn't sure who to trust. But you need to see this. She plugged the drive into the nearest terminal. Footage loaded. Black and white. Silent. It showed Whitmore at his desk, alone. Late at night. He opened a drawer, pulled out a stack of exams, flipped through, then stopped, pulled one paper out, looked at it, paused, then placed it in the shredder. Eden gasped. Jonah said, I cross-referenced the stack count. 1 fewer after that night. Your test. I'm sure of it. Eden couldn't speak. Jonah added, there's more. He flagged your name in a staff meeting. Said your situation should disqualify you from recommendation lists. Eden stood there, shoulders shaking. Not from fear, from fury. She whispered, they're trying to end me. Jonah nodded. And now they've escalated it to the university. Eden stared at the screen. Her test. Her name. Her work. Destroyed. And now her integrity on trial. Eden couldn't breathe. Her test had been shredded. The midterm she'd studied for, dominated, and turned in with her own hands, destroyed in private by the very man who now called her dishonest. Professor Whitmore had done it calmly, deliberately, and thanks to Jonah, she'd seen it with her own eyes on a black and white grainy recording that didn't need sound to scream injustice. She walked back to her dorm in silence, the USB drive in her coat pocket feeling heavier than steel. She didn't speak. didn't text, just stared ahead, barely noticing the biting wind slicing across campus. Inside her room, she sat on her bed and opened the drive again. Re-watched the footage. Then again, she watched his hands, his body language, the absence of hesitation. It wasn't an accident. It was a decision. The photo of her test's front page was proof she had been there. The video was proof he had tried to erase that fact. But neither guaranteed justice. Not in a system where authority wrote the rules, and students of color had to scream just to whisper. Then, a ping. A message. Holloway a Lincoln HS. Subject, come see me. Bring everything. Eden just caught wind of what's happening through some mutuals. I'm in the city. Tomorrow, 7 a.m. Same cafe. Bring your notebooks. And your drive. Coach A. She hadn't seen Mr. Holloway in over a year. Her former high school math coach had been one of the first adults to believe in her genius. Without watering it down. He'd pushed her, challenged her, and most importantly, saved things she hadn't realized mattered. She met him before sunrise. The cafe on 86 smelled like cinnamon and ambition. He was already there, sipping black coffee. Same cracked leather journal in hand. Same eyes that saw more than they said. He stood when he saw her. Kid, he said, pulling her into a brief hug. You look tired. I am. They sat. Silence settled like old dust. You brought it? Eden slid over a folder. Her proof. Her printed screenshots. And the US. He opened it slowly. I read the online chatter. He said, listen to that anonymous podcast. Watch the subreddit heat up. I had a feeling it'd go this far, but I didn't expect this. Eden nodded. I thought I was ready. Turns out, I've been playing chess with people who write the rules mid-game. He chuckled. Then it's time to flip the board. He reached into his messenger bag and pulled out a different folder. You remember those old notebooks you left behind in the supply closet your junior year? Her brow furrowed. You kept them? All of them. She blinked. Why? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he slid the folder across the table. Because I knew one day the world would try to pretend you didn't exist. And I wanted receipts. Eden opened the folder. It was a time capsule. Handwritten notes in her looping print. Full explorations of nonlinear dynamics. Exploratory chaos theory models. A hand-built algorithm simulating predator-prey population cycles. 2 years before she even had access to formal coursework. She blinked hard. I sent them to someone, Holloway said. A friend of mine. He's at MIT. Been in the math department 30 years. Used to work on neural geometry. She stared at him. You, what? He read through your material. Called me the next morning and said, quote, who the hell is this kid? And why isn't she already published? Eden felt something move in her chest for the first time in weeks. Not pride, not joy. Something older than both. Validation. Holloway leaned back. He said your chaos model, that simulation you built using only Trigon spreadsheets, matches patterns they've only just begun formalizing using topological data analysis. That was just me playing around with oscillations. No, Eden. That was genius. Pure, unfiltered, uncoached genius. She swallowed hard. The edges of her vision blurred. I want to help, he continued. I've already formatted your findings. I even did some light annotations, standard stuff, cleaned up grammar, added abstract sections. It's ready. She looked up. Ready for what? He pulled out another page, a journal submission form, with her name in bold, at the top, the Journal of Modern Mathematics. Her hands trembled. You're submitting this? I want to. Under your name. You deserve to have this work in the world. She stared down at the paper, at her name in a font she didn't recognize, but somehow still felt like home. Then he cleared his throat. But there's one thing. She froze. There's a condition, he said quietly. The air changed. Eden's throat tightened. What kind of condition? I'd like to be listed as co-author. Her body went still. What? I edited it. Did some formatting. The journal will take it more seriously if it looks collaborative. Her pulse thudded in her ears. But I wrote every word. I know you did, and I'll never say otherwise. But this is the way things work. Sometimes you need someone with tenure to vouch for the work's legitimacy. The system isn't built for solo undergrads to make waves, especially not the kind that threaten reputations. Eden felt her heart split. Mr. H, I thought you believed in me. I do. That's why I want it to get published. She stared down at the submission form. It was her work, her mind, her proof. but he wanted a piece of it. I don't need you to co-sign me, she said finally. He nodded slowly. You do if you want to win this fight. She stood, eyes burning. No, I need to win it without becoming what I'm fighting. Before he could reply, she was gone, out the door, out into the cold. That night, Eden couldn't sleep. Her notebooks were still spread across her desk. Her old formulas, her handwriting. She scanned each page, like she was rediscovering a part of herself, lost in the noise. Then she opened her laptop, started typing. Not a complaint, not an appeal. A paper, one she'd write from scratch, built from her own mind, using every pattern she'd ever studied, every model she'd ever imagined. A blend of statistics, topology, and theory that defied categorization. She worked for 12 straight hours, didn't stop for food or sleep, just built from nothing. At 9 a.m., she sent it directly to the journal. No co-author, no edits, just her. An hour later, an automated reply confirmed receipt. And just as she leaned back, ready to breathe, her inbox dinged again. A new message from the Office of Academic Integrity. Subject: formal hearing scheduled. Date: Friday. She closed her eyes. Friday would decide everything. Her reputation, her future, her right to exist in a place that had tried to erase her. But this time she wouldn't come empty-handed. She had proof. She had truth. And now, she had her voice. The hearing was approaching like a storm. 2 days. That's what they'd given her. 48 hours to prepare a defense for an accusation, rooted not in evidence but in erasure. Eden walked through Columbia Tech's campus with a cold awareness. She no longer existed as a student. She was a symbol now. A cipher people filled with their own biases, hopes or fears. Students stared. Professors paused. Even janitors watched her with hesitant eyes, unsure whether she was a rising star or a falling one. And then came the note. It wasn't official. It didn't come from the administration or the Office of Academic Integrity. Just a sheet of ivory paper, folded twice, taped to the front of her locker in the math wing. Room 104, 4 p.m. Bring your brain. No signature. Just that precise, hurried handwriting. Whitmore. Eden showed up 5 minutes early. She always did. Room 204 wasn't used for regular classes. It was tucked away behind the lecture halls, barely bigger than a seminar room. She pushed the door open and found 4 men already inside. Whitmore stood in front of the chalkboard, arms folded. To his left, Professor Delaney from theoretical physics. To his right, Dr. Ames from statistical modeling. And furthest back, Dr. Curran, a visiting scholar from the University of Chicago, known for reviewing high-profile academic misconduct cases. They weren't there to observe. They were there to witness. Eden stepped in, closed the door, didn't. Whitmore gestured toward the board, where a sprawling equation had already been drawn in faint, ghostly white. Do you recognize this? He asked. Eden scanned it. Multidimensional vector field compression, boundary inversion, topological singularities nested within a parametric function. The expression danced with implicit complexity. She took a breath. Yes, it's unsolved, Whitmore said. Some consider it one of the last great unpublished challenges in fluid vector mechanics. Eden nodded. I've read about it. Whitmore smirked. Then solve it. Just like that. No warning. No prep. No grace. Right now? She asked. Right now. In front of us. No notes. No internet. Just chalk and mind. Eden didn't blink. Why? Whitmore stepped forward. Because you've made a string of serious accusations. About your midterm. About department bias. About my ethics. But this is clean. This is truth. This is mathematics in its purest form. If you are who you say you are, this is your moment. Eden looked past him at the other professors. Their faces weren't smug. They were skeptical. Neutral. They were watching to see whether she'd falter or rise.
You think this proves something?
She said quietly. Whitmore folded his arms. If you can solve this, it ends the debate. If not, well, the hearing may be conclusive. She let the silence stretch. I'll do it, she said. But on one condition. Whitmore raised an eyebrow. It has to be recorded. Full video. No edits. It goes public. Delaney spoke for the first time. That's irregular. These sessions are usually internal. Irregular, Eden said, her voice calm but steel-edged. So is shredding someone's midterm? Curran coughed softly, but didn't object. Whitmore hesitated. He hadn't expected her to demand transparency. But backing down now would make him look evasive. Fine, he said. We'll arrange a recorder. Eden stepped forward, took the chalk. The room was silent, except for the soft ticking of the wall clock and the dry scrape of chalk meeting slate. She didn't rush. She didn't dazzle. She thought. She stepped back, erased, redrew. She moved across the board, as if conducting a silent orchestra. Every gesture deliberate. Her mind navigated layers of nested variables, folding and unfolding multidimensional logic. She didn't try to be perfect. She tried to be true. Time passed. The professors whispered. Whitmore watched like a hawk. And still she worked. She broke the problem into components, introduced a polar frame, reshaped the function into wavelets, applied a boundary condition most would have missed. Every 10 minutes she paused, like a chess player, then resumed with new strategy. Finally she stopped, stepped back. Sweat lined her temples. The board was full, top to bottom. She capped the chalk. This, she said, is one potential path to reducing the system into solvable components. It's not the only way, but it's clean, and it holds under substitution. Whitmore approached. Slowly. He read each line. So did Delaney. And Ames. Corinne remained still. 15 minutes passed in total silence. Then Corinne spoke. She didn't solve it completely, but she constructed a legitimate transformation. This approach is publishable, and if extended, might push the problem into tractable terrain. Whitmore's face was unreadable. Delaney added, I've seen grad students choke on simpler problems. She didn't choke. Ames shrugged. It's elegant. Eden stood tall, but her hands were clenched behind her back. Then Whitmore stepped forward. He smiled. But it was the kind of smile that didn't reach the eyes. You're very clever, he said. But cleverness doesn't excuse dishonesty. Eden's brow furrowed. You set this up to see if I'd crack. No, he said. I set this up so they'd doubt you less. I knew you'd rise to the occasion. Corinne tilted his head. Then why the hearing? Whitmore's voice remained calm. Because we must uphold process. Eden laughed once. Bitter. Process? You shredded my test. Whitmore said nothing. Corinne shifted in his seat. You don't deny that? Whitmore looked at the others. There's no evidence. Eden stepped forward. There's video. The room froze. Delaney said. Video? I have footage of him discarding my midterm. I received it from a graduate assistant who feared retaliation. Eames looked at Whitmore. Is that true? Whitmore said nothing. Eden turned to Corinne. I'll provide the footage, and copies of my photo timestamps. You can authenticate it yourself. The room turned, but Eden wasn't done. She pulled out a folder, and here's something else. My independent research. Already submitted for peer review. Original traceable timestamped. I'm not just a student defending myself. I'm a scholar proving I never needed their permission to be brilliant. The air thickened. Corinne nodded slowly. I think we've heard enough. Eden exhaled, then turned toward Whitmore. I agreed to this demonstration under one condition, that it be recorded. Whitmore nodded stiffly. It was. She stared at him. Then publish it. Let the whole department see. He hesitated. I'll review. No, she cut in. This isn't a lecture. This was a trial, and I just passed it. She turned and walked out. Behind her, silence. Until Corinne spoke again. I want that footage, and her materials. Now. Whitmore didn't reply. Because for the first time he didn't have a move left to play. The email came before sunrise. Subject Departmental Open Colloquium. Subheader. A demonstration of academic integrity and genius. Name. Eden Grant. Time 3. Location Lecture Hall B8. The Tower. No summary. No context. Just time, place, and name. That was enough. By noon, the rumors spread like fire across Columbia Tech's campus. Someone posted a screenshot of the email on the university subreddit. Another student shared it in the STEM Discord with the caption, "She's really doing this," publicly. By 2:30 p.m., the line outside the lecture hall wrapped down 2 floors. At 2:45, the dean's office requested the event be streamed to overflow rooms. By 2:50, faculty who'd never attended a student event in years were filing into the front rows. Every seat was taken. Dozens stood pressed against the back wall, phones in hand. And in the backstage corridor, Eden stood still, alone in a quiet she'd earned. She was dressed simply. Black sweater, blue jeans, no makeup. her hair pulled into a tight bun. She didn't need to dress for impact. Her proof would be enough. Beside her, Jonah held the tablet streaming the setup. You're live on 3 cameras. Sound checks clean. Faculty server is running and backed up to external cloud storage. He looked at her, voice low. There's no stopping this now. Eden nodded once. Good. Emily joined them, eyes shining. People believe in you. Eden gave a slight smile, but her eyes were cold steel. I don't need them to believe, she said. I just need them to see. At 3:00 p.m. sharp, the announcement rang through the auditorium. Presenting Eden Grant, undergraduate scholar, mathematics division. The doors opened. She stepped into the light. Phones rose instantly. The crowd hushed. Even the professors straightened in their chairs. It wasn't just a presentation. It was an event. The kind of moment that turns rumor into reckoning. Eden walked to the front of the room with the silence of someone who had already rehearsed the confrontation 100 times in her mind. Her feet didn't falter. Her hands didn't shake. On the front row, Professor Whitmore sat with his arms crossed. To his left was Dr. Delaney. On his right, Dean Carr. Neither smiled. Eden reached the chalkboard, took a piece of fresh white chalk from the tray, then turned to face the crowd. I've been called a fraud, she said, her voice strong and unhurried. I've been accused of dishonesty. I've been investigated, gaslit, and targeted. But today, I'm not here to defend myself. I'm here to teach, because the math doesn't lie. People do. The room stilled. She turned back to the board and began. Her handwriting was clean and deliberate. No rushed gestures, no theatrics. She started with a simple linear expression, deceptively basic. As the audience leaned in, she began layering. She took that expression and reframed it, added depth, shifted it through matrices, transformed it into a non-linear space. Gradually, she revealed a complex multidimensional structure, hiding beneath the surface, chaotic at first glance, but methodically ordered. This wasn't just math. This was storytelling. Each line had purpose. Each transformation carried weight. By minute 15, the lecture had transitioned into what most would consider doctoral-level theory. Eden wasn't just solving. She was building, constructing a new mathematical identity for a class of functions previously dismissed as unstable. But more than that, she was repurposing a familiar ghost. In the second half of her proof, she introduced a function developed 5 years prior by a prominent faculty member. A function Whitmore had once presented at a national conference, but quietly retracted after a postdoc disproved it. Eden's eyes didn't flick toward him, but she could feel it. The tension. He saw what she was doing. She took his original failure and corrected it. Not out of malice, but precision. Her model restructured the assumptions he'd made about boundary constraints, reframed the data under a novel symmetry condition, and arrived at a convergence point that had previously been deemed unreachable. The crowd didn't understand the subtext, but Whitmore did. Delaney did. Dean Carr did. Eden paused for effect, then walked to the side of the board where she had saved a blank section. There, in slow, bold strokes, she wrote, "Brilliance is not up for permission." And below it, Eden Grant. The auditorium froze,
Then erupted.
Applause surged like thunder. Students rose to their feet. Phones tilted for the perfect shot. Hashtags were already forming. Eden proves it trended on Twitter before she even stepped away from the board. But not everyone clapped. Whitmore remained still, his jaw set, his fingers twitching against the armrest. Dean Carr slowly stood. The room went quiet again. He stepped forward, motioning toward the front mic. "Miss Grant," he began. "That was astonishing. But I must ask, was this demonstration your idea?" Eden nodded. "Yes. But not for credit. Not for fame. Just truth." The dean looked toward Whitmore. "I'd like to see the video footage of this demonstration. And I'd like to speak with the Office of Academic Integrity immediately." Whitmore finally moved. He stood. "I'd like to state for the record," he said, "that while Miss Grant is clearly talented, this does not address the question of her missing midterm." Eden held her ground. "No. But the footage of you shredding that midterm does." Gasps rippled through the audience. Whitmore's face didn't change, but his knuckles whitened on the podium. Dean Carr looked between them. "You have footage?" Jonah stepped forward from the side aisle, holding a flash drive. "Yes," he said. "Multiple angles. Time-stamped. With audio." Kerr accepted it silently. Eden turned back to the audience. "You were never supposed to see me win. You were supposed to see me fail. But I don't owe failure to people who only ever measured me against their fear. The silence was reverent now. Then, as if on cue, a tall woman stood at the back of the room. She wore a tan blazer, her arms folded tightly, her face unreadable. She stepped forward and said, "Miss Grant, I represent the Journal of Modern Mathematics. Your paper was received and reviewed ahead of schedule." The entire room turned. "You'll be happy to know," she continued, "we're preparing it for expedited peer review. And if your video performance is as authentic as it appears, we'd like to feature both your demonstration and publication as a joint educational release." Eden didn't blink. "Will I be listed as the sole author?" The woman nodded. "Absolutely." Then added, "You're making history, Miss Grant." But Eden didn't smile. She simply picked up the chalk again and wrote 3 more words below her last line. "Let them watch." Whitmore didn't respond. He just walked out. Dean Carr followed. And as Eden stood before the board, with hundreds watching, it wasn't silence she felt. It was power. The room had fallen into a silence so thick it was almost violent. For a long moment, no one breathed. No one moved. They stared at her, at the board, at the space where Professor Whitmore had stood just minutes earlier before storming out, his face a mess of rage and realization. Eden didn't chase the applause. She didn't soak in the awe. She stepped back, placed the chalk gently on the tray, and nodded once. Not to the audience, but to herself. It was done. She had proven what she came to prove. Not just her intelligence, but her worth, her place, her right to be in that room, on that board, in this field. And yet, somewhere deep inside her chest, she knew it wasn't over. Not yet. Emily was the first to reach her backstage, wrapping her in a tight hug. "You just made history." Eden didn't smile. That's the problem. She meant it. Because history, for people like her, always came at a cost. By that night, the footage was everywhere. It started with a few cell phone videos uploaded to student stories. Then the full HD recording hit Reddit. Then YouTube. Within 4 hours, it had 1 million views. "Black math genius silences Ivy League racism," read the headline on a trending blog. The video was split, captioned, TikToked and translated into Spanish, Korean and French within a day. She didn't speak to press. She didn't post a tweet. But still, Eden Grant was viral. Professors from other universities shared her proof on LinkedIn. Civil rights activists praised her poise. Black STEM communities hailed her as the symbol of a new academic age. She was called a generational mind, and a blueprint for every student who's ever been underestimated. And yet the congratulatory noise barely reached her. Because just as her name was rising, another email hit her inbox. Subject: Academic Standing Review. Notification: Sender: University Registrar. Dear Miss Grant, due to recent public dissemination of internal academic materials and unauthorized recordings during official class proceedings, the university has initiated a formal review of your academic standing. Effective immediately, your access to departmental facilities and resources is restricted pending resolution of the investigation. She read it 3 times. Then again. It wasn't congratulations. It was retaliation. They hadn't disputed the math. They hadn't disputed the footage. They'd simply shifted the frame from the truth to the method. From the fraud committed against her, to the fact that she showed it. Emily burst into her room minutes later, already shaking with disbelief. "Tell me you saw it." "I saw it. They're freezing Jonah too. And me. I just got blocked from accessing TA resources." Eden turned to her laptop. "They're covering themselves." Jonah texted next. "They're trying to remove the video from the university servers. I have 3 backups. Don't worry." She messaged him back. "Don't let them isolate you. Keep everything offline for now." She knew what was happening. This wasn't about rules. It was about optics. They couldn't silence her when they controlled the narrative. But now that the narrative had escaped, they were trying to cut her legs out from under her before she could walk on what she'd built. She sat alone in the common room that night, the glow of her laptop casting long shadows across the walls. Hundreds of unread messages blinked in her inbox.
Request for interviews. Praise. Inquiries about speaking engagements.
One was even from a tech giant offering her a summer internship. She ignored them all. Instead, she opened a blank document and began to write. Not an essay.
Not approved.
A statement. To Columbia Tech faculty and student body. Subject: Public statement on academic truth. My name is Eden Grant. I am a 3rd-year student in the mathematics division. Some of you may know me from a recent colloquium. in which I presented a proof previously considered unsolvable. What you do not know is that this proof was never meant to be a performance. It was meant to be a response to the weeks I spent being erased. My midterm was shredded. My name was removed from internal records. I was placed under investigation based on nothing but silence. And when I proved my integrity publicly, the university responded not with apology, but with threat. If brilliance is not up for permission, then neither is the truth. She sent it to every department head, every student body list, every organization on campus. Then she posted it to her public profile. Within an hour, it had gone viral. Again. The next day, a student rally began forming on the quad. It wasn't her idea. She didn't even attend at first. But by noon, over 400 students had gathered, many of them holding signs with variations of her final chalkboard phrase. Let them watch. Permission denied. We are not experiments. The student union issued a formal letter to the dean's office, demanding an end to the investigation and a full audit of the mathematics department's grading practices. The diversity office, previously silent, published a blog post of support. By late afternoon, her mailbox pinged again. This time, it was Dean Carr. Subject: request for private discussion. Eden stared at it, then deleted it. But the war wasn't over. The following morning, she received a certified letter at her dorm door, hand-delivered, from the university legal office. It informed her that the footage, while compelling, had been recorded in violation of policy, that she had compromised departmental security and academic confidentiality, that she was being considered for academic misconduct on grounds of unauthorized documentation and dissemination of restricted materials. It was absurd. And it was strategic. She knew the tactic. When they can't argue the facts, they argue the frame. She sent it straight to the ACLUE email address she'd been passed by a professor from the law school. Then she forwarded it to the Student Media Coalition, attached with one line, "They're trying to disappear me again. Let's see how loud they can get." The next day, Eden finally stepped into the rally. The quad was full. Hundreds, possibly more. Students wearing her name on shirts. Chalk drawings of her equations scrawled across sidewalks. Signs quoting her phrases. At the front was a podium, hastily built but standing strong. Jonah found her first. "It's your turn," he said. "They've spoken. Now it's your voice." Eden nodded and walked toward the front. As she climbed the steps, her eyes scanned the crowd, not looking for support, looking for witnesses. She took the mic. "I want to make one thing clear," she said. "I didn't do any of this for applause." The crowd quieted instantly. "I did this because I was told to stay small, because I was told my success was conditional, that brilliance could be revoked if it wasn't convenient." She paused. "I have never cheated. I have never lied. I have only refused to vanish." She raised a printed copy of the university's letter. This is how they reward refusal. With silence, with threat, with bureaucratic revenge. She held it high, then dropped it, and it fluttered to the ground like the proof of what she already knew. They were afraid, not of her failure, but of her success. Because when brilliance can't be owned, the system sees it as a threat. And Eden? She was unownable. Back in her room as the chants from the quad still echoed, she opened one last email before midnight. Subject: urgent, new development. It was from a faculty whistleblower, one who had been silent until now. "Eden, I need to meet. It's bigger than your midterm. It wasn't just your paper they shredded. And it wasn't the first time. You're not the only one. I have records. I need to show you something. They've been doing this for years. You just happened to catch them." She read it again, twice, then sat back in her chair, a chill running through her spine. She hadn't just opened a wound. She'd torn open a pattern, and it was only just beginning. The little incomplete label wasn't supposed to matter. Beneath the Calculus 3 listing in her student portal, tiny red text blinked the words, "Status, incomplete." Eden stared at it on her screen, as though it had materialized from thin air. Her chest tightened. A ripple of rising panic mixed with anger wound through her. This wasn't a glitch. It was deliberate. That afternoon, her phone buzzed with a message from Sandra Lee, the internship coordinator at Kite Labs. "Eden, we're placing your summer internship on indefinite hold due to recent concerns involving your academic standing." Her chest clenched tighter. The words were bureaucratic yet brutal. A cold curtain drawn shut on opportunity. She had won in the public eye, proved her intellect, fought injustice. But her own university was quietly sealing doors, erasing her triumph with invisible ink. Minutes later, Emily burst into her dorm, eyes wide with alarm. "They marked it incomplete," she said, motioning at the screen levied between them. Silent rage coiled in Eden's gut. It wasn't enough that they tried to erase her test, not enough that they branded her arrogant or aggressive or worse. They would rewrite records, rewrite reality. "They're punishing me through paperwork," Eden whispered. Emily nodded, voice shaking. "They're camouflage resistance. You expose them, they bury you." She looked at Eden. "What do we do?" There was a silent moment, electric with urgency. "I go to the source." By the time Eden reached the registrar's office, the building felt sterile and colossal. White walls, fluorescent lights, humming overhead, glass cases filled with honor rolls, and fancy plaques stood as silent witnesses to the unspoken rule. This school existed to protect itself, even at moral cost. The receptionist gave Eden a practiced smile, the one that said troublemaker, not victor. "I need to speak with the registrar," Eden said, her voice quiet but firm. The receptionist looked at her name in the system. "You'll need an appointment." Eden shook her head. "Tell them Eden Grant is here. I'll wait." Something in her tone made the assistant hesitate, then nod. 5 minutes later, a midday sun filtered through the window as a staff member, a young woman clutching a file, invited Eden down a hallway lined with portraits of Dean's past. At the end of the hallway was a heavy wooden door. She took a breath, steadying her nerves, and entered. Inside, sitting at a conference table, were two figures she hadn't expected. Dean Carr looked up first, measured expression, posture officially concerned. Beside him sat Dr. Marla Shin, head of the Data Ethics and Systems Lab, a sharp mind and a reputation for integrity. Eden's gaze traveled from her banner, and then around the table. "This is unexpected," Eden said, voice brittle. Dean Carr nodded. "We were expecting you." He gestured for Eden to sit. She hesitated, then took the seat across from them. Dr. Shin cleared her throat. "We've reviewed your file. The changes to your midterm status were not just anomalies. They were orchestrated." Eden's breath caught. Orchestrated. Shin laid out printouts. Time-stamped logs of her assignment submission, server logs showing that the file was received, then removed, administrative override logs, metadata showing when and by whom the change occurred. Dean Carr leaned forward. "Professor Whitmore used emergency override protocols to remove your submission, and there's no record of authorization beyond his user account." Eden swallowed. "So he just deleted it." "It seems so. But that override leaves a trace, and that trace is what I'm here to follow." Eden asked, voice low, "Is anybody funding this?" Kerr looked at Shin. Shin nodded. "I've secured special independent oversight to audit these logs. No departmental cover-up this time." A tremor of hope warmed Eden. "So you believe me?" "We believe nobody should erase a student's future," Carr said quietly. "If there's proof, we'll act." Eden exhaled. Relief and fear tangled in her chest. Then Dr. Shin slid over another folder. "These aren't just departmental logs," she said. "They include university-wide submission data, scientifically preserved." Eden dug in and found another set of documents. Emails of support from alumni, faculty complaints about Whitmore's conduct, even past whispers of a student whose records vanished without explanation. The picture was no longer isolated to one student or one professor. It spanned years. Shin said, "You're not alone anymore." Eden looked at her. "Then what happens now?" Dean Carr leaned across the table. "We escalate this. To the president. To the integrity board. We won't go to war quietly." Eden closed her eyes briefly. The weight shifted. She felt not just relief, but vindication. But just as she said, "Thank you," an assistant poked her head in. "Dean Carr, it's the registrar. She's on the line. She wants to clarify process." Carr looked down at his watch. Eden rose. Before she left, Carr placed a hand on her arm, just for a moment. "We're fighting now," he said, "and the first victory is yours." As Eden walked out, the corridor felt thinner somehow, brimming with possibility. But on the desk beneath the framed photos, she noticed one portrait, nearly hidden in shadow. A photo of a former math dean. His gaze was stern, judgmental, familiar. Because that wasn't just any former dean. It was Professor Whitmore. The cracks were starting. Because the story out there was just beginning. Eden's phone buzzed just as she reopened her laptop. Again, searching for calm. The subject line was simple. I saw what they did to you. It happened to me too. She sighed and opened the message. Curiosity tempered by dread. A former student wrote of uncanny echoes. A brilliant performance. Abruptly halted, then erased from records. Graduation slips, academic probation, devastated futures, all without explanation or recourse. Fear of retaliation had kept these stories buried, until now. That message unsettled her. But that was just the beginning. Within 48 hours, her inbox flooded with over 20 similar stories, each unique, yet structured by the same cruel geometry: excellence erased, silence enforced, shame weaponized. She pressed pause on her midterm appeal process and turned her dorm space into a war room. Every story got a row in a spreadsheet: year of occurrence, department, professor involved, sanctions applied, whether the student appealed, and outcomes. As the list grew, a terrifying geometry emerged. It wasn't just Professor Whitmore. Patterns appeared, committees shielding each other, thresholds crossed by early silencing of students of color who outperformed expectations. Eden leaned back. Daylight slipped through the blinds. She felt less alone yet heavier. These weren't isolated incidents. They were symptoms of a structure. Later that evening, she composed and sent an email. To Dr. Shin. Subject: I need to talk. It's bigger than I thought. When they met over Zoom, Dr. Shin's eyes were steady. You've uprooted a system, she said. Eden was quiet, raw. I wasn't looking for a movement. Shin replied, but it found one. They decided to do something bold. Eden organized a Zoom call for the following weekend. Open to any alumni willing to share, she expected perhaps 5 brave voices. Instead, over 17 showed up. The call was quiet at first. Faces on screen, framed with books or graduation photos. Intent, guarded, none spoke. But when Eden shared her echo file findings, something shifted. Latrice, an alumna from 2018, was first. Her voice trembled. She described being the top math student in her class, only to have her final transcript denied due to an alleged attendance issue, even though she'd never missed a day. Dean referrals, silent appeals, everything stonewalled. Then Diego. Graduate school dreams shattered. Accused of fabricating experiment results. He was never asked to defend himself. He walked away embarrassed. Graduate school applications shredded. Kira. She testified before the ethics board. Whitmore called a quote hers too emotional for pure mathematics. Her thesis advisor dropped her project entirely. Each voice was different, but echoed the same tune of institutional betrayal. Eden blinked through tears. It wasn't just you, she realized. It's not just me, and it hasn't been just for one. We're echoes. She said so. Their voices stayed steady. Calm, resolute. Not casualties but survivors. And now messengers. Jonah and Emily helped Eden compile their narratives, anonymized for safety, into the echo file. It was more than a PDF. It was a dossier of systemic cruelty. Records, details, timestamps, receipts. Eden wrote an introduction. This dossier is not a retaliation. It is a reckoning. We are echoes, voices that should never have been silenced. And now, we will not be disregarded. They released the echo file on Monday. By Tuesday it had exploded. Academic Twitter erupted. Hashtags, I'm not the problem. Echoes, of truth, voices that won't be erased, trended within hours. Student unions reposted the file. Civil rights organizations reached out. Even donors privately questioned protocols. Some faculty messaged Eden behind the scenes. A faculty member from another university wrote, "Every student of color has a version of this story. Thank you for bringing it to light." Amid the surge, her phone rang. Blocked caller ID. She answered, breath caught. "Ms. Grant? This is Jasmine Reeve, New York Times education correspondent." The voice said, calm, clear, expectant. Eden swallowed. "I want your story, all of." The morning after the echo file went public, Eden unfolded her laptop with a sense of surrender. This was no longer her fight. It had become public reckoning. Echo file trended not just on campus forums, but across platforms: Twitter threads, Instagram stories, TikTok duets. The chalkboard proof, the storyboard of her brilliance, now had soundtracks, memes, and virality beyond her imagination. Clips of her dismantling the narrative that tried to erase her were viewed millions of times. National media caught on. The first was the New York Times. A genius in the shadows. How one black student exposed a culture of academic sabotage. The piece cast Eden, not as a crusader, but a reluctant standard-bearer, forced into the spotlight to perform integrity. By late morning, CNN aired a segment, The Calculus of Bias, Inside an Elite STEM Institution's Reckoning. Panelists debated academic racism, prevention, and power dynamics. MSNBC followed with Scholar versus System, When Exposure Becomes Weapon. Eden watched it all, quiet behind her screen. She hadn't asked for any of this. But once the narrative slipped beyond her control, she let it ripple. The university's next move was calculated. Columbia Tech is committed to upholding academic integrity. We are reviewing the circumstances raised by current and former students. No names. Perfect neutrality. But outside, the campus ignited. A sit-in formed at the dean's lawn. Students demanding investigation, repeal of harassment policies, and clearing of Eden's record. Alumni began withdrawing financial pledges. Some prominent donors attached conditions to future funding: transparency, external audits, and zero tolerance for department-level malfeasance. A law student filed a Freedom of Information request. Another anonymous hacker shared internal emails. Professors making offhand remarks about keeping the nerd pipeline quiet and profiling the quiet ones. The rot wasn't just rumor, it was recorded. Amid the shock, a new call came. Not from reporters, but a letter from a National Science Foundation. We'd like to fund you. No strings attached. Take your work anywhere. Eden paused before replying. She wasn't seeking redemption. She sought justice. She would take the opportunity, yes, but on her own terms. Then came the headline that slammed harder than any applause. Whitmore v. Grant. Defamation, malice, reputational damage. The lawsuit appeared like a locust swarm across local courts. Headlines read, Professor resigns, sues student who exposed him. His claims were chilling. That Eden's allegations had irreparably harmed his career, endangered his safety, and turned an internal dispute into defamation. That her campaign against him, amplified by hashtags and media, was tantamount to a modern-day trial by social media, not academic process. She stared at it as though the words were physical blows. But reality and justice aren't always symmetrical. Emily barged in, eyes wild. What do we do now? Eden calmed her, voice steady but quiet. We keep going. Jonah looked up from multiple tabs, legal articles, precedents. They're attacking the messenger instead of the message. Eden nodded. The system's fallback is always character assassination. The next 48 hours were a crush. Organized student groups rallied behind her. Faculty who had quietly supported her stepped forward with public statements. Some admitted they'd been hesitant, but her courage gave them the backbone they lacked. Across departments, scholars signed an open letter. We stand with Eden Grant. Her truth exposed what we could not, because we weren't forced to. Student organizations began hosting teach-ins. Academic Integrity 101, Bias in STEM, When Whistleblowers Win. The student union demanded the university appoint independent investigators. Nationally, op-eds appeared. One headline read, The Quiet Math Prodigy Who Forced an Elite University into the Light. Across social platforms, another phrase began trending. Let them watch. A callback to Eden's board sign-off. It became a symbol of not just defiance, but refusal to erase a narrative. Behind the scenes, Eden carefully built her legal response with pro bono lawyers. They advised, don't back down. Maintain the moral high ground. Document everything. Let the public narrative stand. Her university, meanwhile, scheduled a press conference. The department chair, Dean Carr, and the president soon to be overshadowed by this maelstrom. They read safe, curated statements about regret, concern, thorough review, and commitment to students. But students weren't fooled. On campus, someone branded the chalkboard in the tower with spray chalk. Justice is not academic. Within hours, a new rumor spread. Student government would vote on stripping the math building of its Whitmore Hall name. Then came the unexpected twist. A previously dormant Twitter account, The Real Mathaloom, began posting unredacted evidence, emails, submission logs, faculty memos. It cited Eden and Dr. Shin as clearinghouses for systemic injustice. It stated that at least a dozen records of wholesale academic erasure existed, fully documented. Murmurs circulated that someone in the administration had leaked it, the first internal ally stepping forward. But the larger shock came from inside the law school. A dozen first-year law students announced they were forming a legal defense fund for Eden. They weren't waiting on official channels. They believed her truth was a test case for academic integrity. Then, Whitmore resigned, but not quietly. In a letter to the board, he cited irreversible damage and loss of control over the environment he'd helped build. But anonymously, faculty learned he submitted the resignation under threat of imminent dismissal. Still, the university accepted it, publicly casting it as mutual agreement. But that wasn't the end. He filed his lawsuit. The timing was a shockwave. A man he had tried to erase had risen, and now he was suing, trying to displace the narrative, reassert dominance, and force a counterscreen. Eden stared at the lawsuit again, late into the night. Every claim picked apart with legal precision. But it wasn't just legal. It was rhetorical. A move to scare, to silence. But when a system resorts to screaming to silence its victim, it admits it cannot answer her. She closed her laptop, looking at the dead pixel of the recording of her proof. She whispered to herself, "Let them watch." Because now, when the nation watched, Eden had become the signal that could not be erased. Her victory wasn't just in proving her math. It was in proving that the system was broken, and that there were people brave enough to stand in the way of its ghosts. The courtroom was carved from heavy marble and old expectations. Eden sat at the defendant's table, calm but burning. Everything in the room, its wood-paneled walls, its pews full of onlookers, the creak of floorboards felt like it had been waiting for this moment for decades. This wasn't just a trial about defamation. It was a collision of stories, one told by the powerful for years, the other finally being spoken. Across from her, Professor Whitmore sat with his shoulders stiff, his jaw tight. His lawyer leaned in with mechanical calm, briefing him again on optics, tone, posture. But Whitmore was unraveling slowly. His reputation, his confidence, his story no longer under his control. Justice Myra Delaney entered. A woman with history etched into her poise. A black judge on the bench of a historically white district. A quiet symbol in herself. She glanced between the parties, her gaze unreadable. This court recognizes the civil claim of defamation and reputational harm. The burden of proof lies with the plaintiff. Mr. Whitmore, proceed. His attorney stood. They painted Eden as calculated, media-hungry, and unreasonably antagonistic. They played clips cut from context of Eden's speech on the quad, her calm voice sounding sharp under their manipulation. She initiated a public campaign of destruction, the lawyer claimed. Instead of seeking redress through proper academic channels, Ms. Grant chose spectacle. A slideshow followed, headlines, tweets, viral clips, memes of Whitmore captioned, "The dinosaur of STEM." The lawyer turned toward Eden. Is this justice? Or is this vengeance masquerading as activism? Eden didn't blink. Then it was her turn. She rose. No fanfare, no dramatic flourish, just her presence. She carried a single manila folder, marked only by a small faded equation scribbled in the corner. A nod to her past. A symbol of what they had tried to erase. "I'm not here to destroy anyone," Eden began, voice low. "I'm here because the truth tried to speak, and someone tried to delete it." She walked toward the courtroom monitor and plugged in a USB. The screen flickered. A time-stamped submission log appeared. Her midterm test, date stamped, server confirmed. One slide showed her upload time. The next showed a deletion. The override log bearing Whitmore's administrative credentials. The courtroom shifted. Lean-ins, widened eyes, the intake of breath so collective, it felt like a weather change. She clicked again. This time a heat map of override commands, color-coded by user access, appeared. You'll see 15 override actions across the last 3 years, all associated with students of color. None were formally appealed, none explained, and all under this access key. She circled the access log. Whitmore, he didn't fail us. He erased us. Next, a short video played, email screen recordings, with metadata intact. In them, jokes among faculty. Another one who thinks she's the next Katherine Johnson.
Let's make sure these diversity admits know where the ceiling is.
The room sat in stunned, uncomfortable silence. Whitmore's lawyer objected, claiming privacy violation. Justice Delaney leaned forward. Do you dispute the emails are real? The lawyer hesitated. Not at this time. Eden didn't stop. Slide after slide built her case. Not in volume, but in precision. Her story was not just personal. It was statistical. A system could lie to individuals, but data. Data told the whole story. Finally, she pulled up a graph comparing incoming GPAs and dropout rates across racial groups. The drop-off line for black students was a cliff. "This is your system," she said softly. "Not mine." The court was quiet. Even Whitmore's posture slumped. Then, Eden clicked one last tab. It was her midterm. The missing proof. The calculus solution Whitmore claimed she never submitted. "I didn't rewrite it. This is the original. Unchanged. Time-stamped." She turned to the judge. "The only fraud here is that I was ever questioned." For a long beat, no one moved. Even the reporters had stopped typing. Justice Delaney stared at the final slide. Eden's scanned equation, clean, elegant, and complete. She finally looked to her clerk, whispered, "She's remarkable," then said aloud, "Court is in recess for 15 minutes. The hallway seemed unchanged, pale blue paint slightly scuffed by years of passing feet, fluorescent lights buzzing with a familiar drone, and framed faculty portraits quietly lining the walls like silent sentinels of tradition. Yet nothing felt the same. There was a new name on the door. Professor Eden Grant, etched in bold, confident letters on frosted glass. The weight of permanence settled gently in her chest as her fingers brushed against it. Not a victory march, just recognition. A narrative shift from the erasure she'd endured. Inside, the lecture hall felt both new and familiar. Rows of seats creaked under waiting weight. Dust motes danced in afternoon light, streaming through windows. The scent of chalk and old books lingered. Then came something deeper, a sense of belonging, of having survived. She slipped behind the podium, her grip steady. She wore navy blue, not black for defiance, not white for innocence, but the shade of quiet authority she'd earned. Her breath was calm. The room lived in silence until she spoke. "Good morning," her voice clear. "Welcome to Calculus 3. Heads lifted, freshmen mostly, but some upperclassmen too, lit by curiosity. Cameras glinted. Some students knew her story. Others just saw a professor. Either way, she had their attention. "First, a confession," she said. "This class has always been my favorite, because it shows us patterns where others see chaos." She caught a few tentative smiles. "We'll do more than math. We'll explore integrity. True, what happens when the system demands silence, and someone finally speaks?" A low murmur at the back. Not resistance, recognition. Behind her, the chalkboard sat, scratched and old. Once, those scratches had felt like scars. Now they were part of the texture, the terrain she'd traversed and survived. She lifted a fresh stick of chalk. As she wrote the first equation, the room shifted. Senses heightening, sunlight glinting, names fluttering silent. She began with a simple matrix, ambient hum of students settling in. Calculus wasn't the toughest part, she'd learned. Being brave to exist as yourself. That was the real work. A door at the back creaked. A late arrival. Silence deepened around the sound. A tall black freshman slipped in, hoodie pulled low, backpack slung heavy. She paused at the threshold, eyes flicking across the board, then landed on Eden. Eden sensed it immediately. She paused mid-lecture, chalk hovering over the half-solved equation. "Welcome," she said without turning, voice soft but strong. The freshman looked stunned. She edged forward and slid into a seat near the front. Not the center, but close enough for sight and safe enough for heart. Eden took a breath, then continued teaching, but with new weight. Every step of the proof now carried intent beyond math. She wanted every student, especially this one, to feel seen, known, allowed. The freshman's eyes stayed wide. She took out her notebook, hands trembling slightly, writing the equation as if it were a lifeline. Eden's voice cut through. "You're exactly where you belong." It wasn't cliché. It was justice. The lecture ended. Students filed out. The freshman lingered. Eden watched her approach, hesitant, careful. "Professor Grant?" she asked.
Yes.
I wanted to say thank you," the girl said, voice low. "For saying I belong. I've been told I don't before. But today." Eden offered a small smile. "You do, and let me prove it in class. Not because of who I am, but because of who you are." The students' eyes glistened. "I'll be there." After class, empty hall. Chalk dust swirling in light. Eden leaned against the podium, finger tracing the equation she'd written. Soft footsteps behind her. Emily entered with 2 coffees. They'd met in those same halls years ago. "You did it," Emily said softly. "I did," Eden replied, voice richer with meaning. Emily nodded. So many of us needed to hear that line. That we belong. Eden tapped the board. It's not just a line. It's a lifeline. Later, her office. Quiet desk. Diploma on the wall now, next to framed courtroom photos. Her evidence. Her victory. She opened her laptop. A new email scrolled into the inbox. Subject: invitation to keynote at National STEM Equity Conference. She read it twice. Then another. Subject: anonymous donation to honor you. To fund diversity scholarships in your name. Her chest tightened. Because her name on that door wasn't just an endpoint. It was the beginning. But the twist came not from accolades but accountability. A soft knock. Jonah entered, eyes serious. Professor Grant, I found something. He placed a folder on the desk. Inside, records of institutional changes. Audit logs showing that every override access point used to erase student work was now disabled system-wide. A memo from Dr. Shin indicating university-wide review boards had been restructured. A note from the president's office confirming that department chairs would no longer have unilateral override powers. Eden sat back. The system itself was changing, not because of her alone, but because she refused to vanish. It's real, she whispered. Jonah nodded. Behind her, the window glowed with late afternoon light. Eden reflected, from erased midterms to erased erasure, from defamed to defender, from lonely student to named professor. She had closed a circle. And yet, as she looked at the chalkboard, now clearing at her side, she realized it wasn't the end. It was full circle. It was the door opening wide for her. For the girl who arrived late. For everyone still carrying the quiet hope that someone would say, "You belong." The name on the door didn't just belong to a professor. It belonged to a promise. A knock on her open door. She turned. And there stood someone unexpected. No one should have to fight this hard just to be seen. If Eden's story moved you, if you've ever been overlooked, doubted, or silenced, then let your voice be louder than their bias. Type yes if you believe in justice. Subscribe if this broke your heart.